Today I'd like to give you two sides of a big argument in Hollywood, and I'm sticking my neck way out and making a couple of predictions. We'll get to that in just a minute.
But first, we want to tell you something about the makers of Lear radios. Many of you may not have heard of Lear radios. We're not surprised, because not many of you fly a plane. But if you do fly, in fact, if you've flown a plane any time since 1930, the name Lear is an old friend to you. For you see, that name has been on fine aircraft radios for more than 15 years. It's been on radios made to keep pilots steadily in touch with their fields, the kind of radios made to guide them unerringly on their courses. This is why we say that since 1930, Lear has been the name men fly by. Now, for the first time, Lear is building home radios. And you can guess what is happening. All that experience with extra precision, all that knowledge of what makes the finest in radio, all that ability to make dependable, efficient sets is going into fine home radios you can get for your home. In a few minutes, we'll tell you more about these Lear home radios. And now, the words we always use on these broadcasts. Mr. Wells' opinions are his own and do not necessarily represent the views of Lear Incorporated.
Where you live, has the world come to an end? Around here, everything seems fairly normal. But according to a man over in Pasadena, the whole works were supposed to be all washed up the day before yesterday. A number of his ardent followers prepared themselves for the explosion by saying their prayers and holding their ears. But my best information is that the world, including Pasadena, is still open for business. But the prophet, occupationally dauntless, is back at his trade. It's the queerest of all trades, this soothsaying, and whether plied by statesmen or phrenologists, the most dispensable. We've beheld our military leaders, heavy with wisdom and gold braid, recording their guesses on many a front page and getting it wrong every time. And then there's Drew Pearson. As a Washington reporter, he's one of our most valuable institutions. But I think my friend Drew is most diverting in those eerie moments when he picks up his little crystal ball and reads the future. And most of the time, Pearson the prophet gets it right. Excepting only his public guessings, which after all are based on Drew's own canny observation, I take a poor view of all forms of rune casting, augury, bump and wrinkle reading, and horoscope making. Be it political or personal, I think fortune-telling is the bunk. So although I now propose to peer into the future and once upon a time myself broadcast some trifling threats concerning the world's ending, don't think I take myself as seriously as the man in Pasadena. It is not generally known in the typical Drew Pearsonian phrase, and it will be officially denied. But the fact is that I was not born with a veil over my face, and when a babe I was not stolen away by the gypsies. In spite of which serious handicaps, here I go with a whole handful of predictions. Prophecy number 1. 9 countries will have the atom bomb within 3 years. That's the best private guess in our State Department and in the foreign ministries of the world. Prophecy number 2. Eric Johnson, a good man, will do a good job for the motion picture industry. Sub-prediction. The group he's taking charge of will still be called the Hayes Office, and we movie makers still won't be able to put things on the screen which are allowed daily in every comic strip. Prophecy number 3. Next week we'll see a general speed-up in the London Conference of Foreign Ministers. But the peoples of the world will find the results unsatisfactory. Hot tip department. In the Army, the chiefs of the Entertainment Committee are working out a plan for entertainment in the next World War. Bureau of Unanswerable Questions. In the midst of atomic battle, who will entertain who? And where will the performances take place? This brings up the current argument on the matter of USO camp shows. In Hollywood, several of our leading citizens have found time in their busy lives to take a rap at entertainment for the GIs overseas and to raise rumpuses about accommodations and even such vaudevillians trivia as billing and publicity. Now, these beefers are not all of them chronic prima donnas or fluff-brained hams. The most convincing and impassioned of all the complaints came from one of the nicest men I know in our business, Frank Sinatra, who says a lot of USO shows insult the intelligence of the GIs and that lots of special service officers are, to quote him, shoemakers in uniform. Another friend of mine whose service overseas exceeds his record by 17 weary and often dangerous months, comes right back at him with language even stronger. This was Marlene Dietrich, who spent the better half of 1 year letting me saw her in half in the Mercury Wonder show for servicemen. Recently, she spent her furlough as our house guest, and before she left for Paris again last week, Marlena reminded me that there have been sent overseas up to now 700 entertainment units. That there's been a show every 2 weeks in every Army and Navy hospital in the country, the grand total being 64,989 performances. I asked Bob Hope about it. Well, I've been traveling all over the world for the last 4 years, Orson, Bob told me, and maybe in some of the places we went to, some of the time, little mechanical things weren't just what they ought to have been. But the effort was always there, and the effort was always good. There have been a lot of beefs about the inefficiency of the whole Army, but we won the war, didn't we? And as for the USO and the special service officers involved in it, a tremendous amount of entertainment went to a tremendous number of boys. They needed it mighty badly. Now I hear there's talk about reducing the budget for entertainment. That's bad. The men overseas are more homesick than they ever were, and they need cheering up more than they ever did. But wait a minute, said Bob. You just wanted a word or two from me. You didn't ask for a book. So I thanked Bob Hope and told him that just about wrapped it up, and I think it does, too. I might add, however, that if General MacArthur can speak out of turn, as a lot of people think he did last week, it isn't very surprising that a couple of actors may possibly have spoken out of turn, too. Sinatra, as a matter of fact, feels every bit as righteous as MacArthur. And with very good reason, too, I think, because the kick he launched wasn't his. Hundreds of fighting men with bad recreational equipment, things like that, asked him overseas as a free, uncensored civilian to speak up in their behalf. But from now on, I guess Frank agrees with me that all squawks against overseas entertainment for GIs had better come from the GIs themselves or be directed to those of us who aren't in uniform and can never do enough. You may remember the woman from Weehawken. Whatever a fan is, she's the opposite. She wrote me the opposite of a fan letter before this radio series even started, demanding to know why it should start at all. Well, here's the second broadcast, and here's another letter from Weehawken already. Dear Madam, you'll excuse me, please, ladies and gentlemen, if I pause again to answer my mail. Dear Madam, concerning my comments on the political scene, you say I sound like one of those starry-eyed dreamers who wants to give a bottle of milk to every Hottentot. To this, madam, I can only say that if giving said milk to said Hottentot will make him a customer for an icebox to keep it in, I think the milk is a good business investment. A couple of days ago in New York, several Americans sat down to the typical meal of a liberated European. The main course consisted of a single canned sardine, and the entire dinner was consumed in about the same length of time it's taken me to tell you about it. Such meals are being held in towns and cities throughout the country, and the difference in the cost is being put into a fund to purchase available food for shipment to our allies in this recent war. May I suggest, madam, that you treat yourself one day next week to such a meal. You may be glad to lose a pound or two. I know I am. Anyway, it'll help you get my point. If we Americans would eat 3 less ounces of meat a week and save the amount or cost of these 3 ounces in money, we'd be able to take care of the meat shortage in Europe for the entire winter. I'd like to see such a program organized with the same ingenuity and enthusiasm we've given to our bond drives. I know we could do it because we are a generous people. We're also shrewd businessmen. Anyway, we have been up to now. We ought to know we can't do business with a bankrupt world. And, madam, the welfare of a woman across the ocean from you is the welfare of Weehawken. The people of Europe, to name just one continent, are your next-door neighbors. Unless they're eating properly, your neighborhood will get to be very run down and shabby-looking. You'll find yourself living in a slum and without any place on our planet to move to. Thanking you for your interest, my dear madam, I remain as ever your obedient servant. Oh, P.S. I find it difficult to believe that last week's mention of bullfighting encouraged the Weehawken young to civil violence and the 10 varieties of mayhem you're kind enough to catalog. But I promise you, one more broadcast and the subject is closed. And you know, friends, come to think of it, I'm glad my critic from Weehawken wasn't with us in Tijuana last Sunday afternoon. You remember I told you Rita and I were taking Joe Cotton and Lenore across the border for their first corrida? Well, we arrived at that border with just time enough and then discovered that we'd locked the trunk compartment in the back of the car and left the key at home. The customs men, persuaded that we were so many jewel smugglers, made us park stateside of the line and proceed on foot. Once in Mexico, we chartered a taxicab made out of what must surely have been the second automobile ever built. And in this we floundered and jounced, feeling like the makings of a milkshake for long ages. I reminded my wife and friends what Chesterton had to say about adventure. Adventure, I quoted between agonized gasps. Adventure is an attitude taken towards discomfort. And at this, the four of us struck the right attitude and the roof of the car. Well, at long last, we came to the bull ring and found a faena in full tilt. It was the first, and I'm very, very much afraid the last, that Joe Cottons will ever see. It happened to be a very bad bullfight, which means it was a very bloody farce. The man and the beast went at each other without the semblance of dignity. There were, besides, unpleasant accidents. Nothing will convince the Cottons that Rita and I are not more than a trifle touched in the head on this matter of bullfighting. Knowing full well that most of you listening must share their suspicions, certainly their sympathy for the bull, I offer in our defense a little story, a true story. But first, your attention, please, for an interesting announcement.
For just a minute or so, we'd like to tell you a little about the new Lear radios. We say new because they haven't been seen before in homes. Only aviators have had them. They were made only for the exacting service of the airlanes. This kind of manufacture takes special craftsmanship. And it's this kind of craftsmanship Lear knows best. It's the kind of craftsmanship and precise engineering that goes into the Lear radio for your home. The Lear line gives you a wide range to choose from. Some sets include television. Some have record players and automatic record changers. Some provide the wonderful Lear recording you've seen advertised. And there's FM and worldwide shortwave. With all their fine engineering and latest developments, you might expect Lear radios to be high-priced. But they're not. And now, Mr. Wells has a few words about next week.
Well, next week we'll have the story. It turns out there isn't time enough for it now. It goes something like this. Once there was a bull, a fighting bull, whose name was Bonito, and who lived in a ranch where fighting bulls are raised and grew up with his fellows, fed and pampered, as such creatures always are, and thoughtfully avoided by all humans, avoided by all, that is, except one, a little boy, the child of one of the ranch hands. Between this fighting bull, Bonito, and this little boy, there grew up a friendship as real and warm as any ever known between a boy and his dog. The villain of this little drama, you'll be glad to hear, is the bullfighter. And better still, there's a happy ending. But now I'll have to say goodbye in the words of the serial. To be continued. And I promised you, remember now, to tell about the greatest man in modern popular music. But I haven't room left on this quarter of an hour to do him justice, so we'll put him off till next time. Anybody who guesses his name gets a free membership in the club I'm founding for the occasion. Anybody who can tell me what the sign in the parking lot in front of the ABC studios means gets a handful of free tickets to their favorite radio show and my everlasting gratitude. The sign reads, "No bailment created here." I will repeat that. The exact words of the sign are as follows: "No bailment created here." I asked my lawyer about it. He was evasive. I even asked the man who runs the parking lot. What does bailment mean, I demanded, and who'd want to create it? I've been working here for 2 years, he told me, and I've never been able to find out. Maybe I'll have the answer by next week anyway. Please let me come to call again. Thanks for this time. Till next Sunday, same time, same station, my sponsors, the makers of Lear radios, and I remain as always, obediently yours.
This is the American Broadcasting Company.